Hello, everyone. This is Hedgie. Happy Saturday to you all. Today I am going to be making soup and sandwiches, and I am going to be making it all from scratch. Although I'm using a little bit of movie magic, in that I am going to use broth that I've already made. I will, however, tell you how I made it. So it's basically just a 2-hour thing that I don't really want to do on screen. Um, so what I have got for you today is I am going to be making a creamy chicken vegetable soup and a garbanzo bean and avocado sandwich. So it's a vegetarian sandwich. I have had a request for vegetarian things, so And as I have been mainly vegetarian for the better part of 20 years, I feel fairly confident about that. Um, Now, the creamy chicken vegetable soup you can very easily make with leftover turkey stock. Um, Basically, your turkey after your Thanksgiving, you can throw that in a pot. I do prefer to use fresh bones. So for my chicken soup, I have used fresh chicken. Now, for the stock, you take a 6 to 8 pound chicken, nice, large, meaty chicken, big breast, 3 carrots that you roughly chop, uh, half a teaspoon of parsley, half a teaspoon of sage, a half a teaspoon of rosemary, 1 large onion, just again, I would take the skin off of it, but then chop it, 3 stalks of celery, just roughly chopped, and 8 cups of water, probably a half teaspoon of ground pepper, and about the same of salt. And you take a large stock pot and add those ingredients into it. Place the pan over medium heat and bring to a boil. Medium high is fine. Reduce the heat to medium low. It's really hard to read a recipe when you're doing that, honey. And basically you simmer the chicken until it's tender, until the joints are loose, basically. And about 2 hours. And then you remove the chicken from the liquid and reserve it for another use. Now, I do this because I find that if you use boiled meat, sometimes it has a dry texture to it, even though it's been in broth the whole time and even served in soup. So my particular favorite thing to do with that is to then dice it and use it in like a chicken salad, because the mayonnaise will add the extra moisture to it that it's lost by being boiled. So you remove the chicken, you strain the liquid into another pan, and discard the vegetables. Basically, the only thing you want out of this is the broth. So we start from that. That'll give you about 6 cups of broth when you're done with that, which is coincidentally what we need for the soup. Now, I have got 2 cutting boards here because you never want to cross-contaminate. And I am going to move a couple things out of the way so I can grab them later. And I am going to, this is our small stock pot. It's, I don't know, probably a foot tall. And the first thing I'm going to do is deal with the chicken. Now, to make the equivalent of a full chicken, I've got 2 chicken breasts here. They are from frozen, and skinless, boneless chicken breasts, and 3 chicken thighs that are also skinless and boneless and rather large. And that will make it so that you've got the meat of 1 chicken to put into your broth. So I will start with processing the chicken. And make sure I've got it in view. And anything that I discard from this is probably going to end up being cooked into little bits that we can then add to my dog's dinner, which he would love. So nothing really goes to waste. As a matter of fact, I try not to waste as much as I possibly can because it's just more feasible financially. It's you don't want to make a lot of garbage basically if you don't have to. If I'm basically going through here and cutting out gristle and little bits of cartilage that they left behind when they did the boning at the factory, and taking out any bits of tendon that I see, things that you really don't want to have in your mouth when you're eating your soup or any other time really. So cutting out the little bits here. And there's a little bit of the breastbone. And then what you want to do is just create a nice dice in this. And once again, knife sharpening by husband, who is very good at it. Now you don't want to have this be tiny pieces, but you don't really want them to be excessively large either. Now, I had a question, someone asked me what's the difference between a soup and a stew. And generally a soup has a thinner broth or stock to it. It's not a gravy, although it can be creamed. But a stew will have bigger pieces. You'll have bigger pieces of veg, you'll have bigger pieces of meat, and it's meant to be a heartier dish than a soup is. So I am almost done with this one, and then I'll show you how to clean up a thigh really quickly. Again, it's just a matter of knowing where the bits of tendon and removing extraneous fat, and knowing where you are going to have cartilage that's left over from the boning process. And you should do this anytime you're using pre-boned chicken, because, well, these are machines for the most part, or people that are in a big hurry, and they don't completely remove it all. They do expect you to do some small amount of preparation to the meat. So if you don't, you just toss it in there as is, then what you're looking at is you're going to end up with a mouthful of cartilage at some point, especially from where on like thighs, where they have bits and pieces that come in from the ends of the bones, where it meets the body and where it meets the leg, the lower leg portion of the leg, the knee joint, so to speak. And I do want to thank everyone that is coming in. It's great to see you here and give me part of your Saturday. I really do appreciate that. I know it's a bit of a sacrifice, especially if you've been working all week, as most people do. And all right, so that is the chicken breasts. Now I'm going to get out the thighs, and you'll see they do look different. Oh, I got an extra one snuck in there. All right, that's great. And I'm going to take the chicken breast out of the way. Alright, I'm just putting it back into its container so that I have something. And we will be getting another camera, just not this month. So we'll get to it, I promise. So you'll have a better view of what I'm doing as we go along. Okay, so there's that. And now we have boneless, skinless chicken thighs. And they basically they just sort of fillet the bone out of there, and you see it's left you with little bits of fat that I find unpleasant to bite into, so I remove them. The dog, however, finds them delicious. And I'm going to take that off. And especially right here is where you're going to find the cartilage, and there is still some here. Right here you can see it. It's right at this joint area, and that can be very unpleasant to bite into. It can also have little bits of bone, so you need to check for that before you cook this for your family. And that piece is dealt with. Now we look at this one and get some of the fat off of it. And that's just intermuscular fat that the chickens have in their thighs that normally if you fry it, it renders better. but this is obviously pre-fried, so double check to make sure. And the best tool you really have in the kitchen for doing this is your fingers, so you can feel what exactly that is that's in there, if it has an off texture. And again, as usual, when you're looking at your food, make sure you don't have dark spots or any off color that might indicate that the chicken or meat that you're using or vegetables that you're using are in a less quality than they should be. Now, you can just as easily use all breast meat. Um, I prefer a mix of the dark and the light because it just gives you better flavor. The dark meat is heavier in fat, so it just naturally has better flavor. And there's always that discussion at the dining room table over Thanksgiving, isn't it? Which would you prefer, dark meat or light? And, well, we've kind of always gone with both. In my family, we have a tendency to like basically all of it. We don't have a lot that's left behind. Let me see. Is that? Okay, that's tendon there. I'm gonna remove that. And I find if you're going to be cutting chicken like this, put it in the freezer for about an hour first because it's easier to deal with. It keeps its shape better, and it just semi-frozen is just easier to deal with. So it makes it easier to cut, and anything you can do that helps you out is good. And there's a tendon sticking out. You can see the tendon right here that sticks out, that goes down the length of the thigh. And that's just tough and unpleasant to chew. And I've got a little bit of cartilage and bone in here. So I'm gonna carefully cut that off without cutting off the finger too. And if you have any questions anywhere along the way, once again, I have the recipes posted in my Discord under Stream Recipes, and they'll pretty much stay there, well, until I decide to get rid of them, but that's not going to be very likely, so they'll probably be there in perpetuity. All right, and now we just process the chicken thighs the same way we process the chicken breast, cutting them up into pieces that are more friendly for the pot and for being a soup. You could just throw these things in whole, but you'd have to then take them out afterwards and cut them up again. So it's really best to do it this way. And how I deal with the chicken after it's cut up here to make it so that it's tender and juicy is I will saute this and add it towards the end of soup cooking, because you don't really want to boil it and have it, basically negate the point of bringing in other chicken rather than using the chicken that you made the stock out of. Now, if you want to skip making your own broth, and if you've ever made your own broth, it's just the difference between this and canned broth or boxed broth is huge. I mean, obviously fresh is better, so using your own chicken, letting it cook with its fat, letting it cook with its bones, and the bones seep out to give their own flavor to it, the marrow within the bones. I mean, it's going to make the broth that you get from canned just taste very pale and thin in comparison. It's always best to make your own if you can. And for me, who is allergic to garlic, I have a tendency to need to do everything on my own, or be very, very careful about labels. And I can't even trust it where it just goes to spices, because generally that means garlic as well. It does make it so that you have a little extra work, but if you do it on a Saturday, um, you can freeze broth for up to 6 months, and you don't even have to put it in big tubs. You can actually freeze it in um, ice cube trays, and then put those cubes of broth into baggies, label with a date, of course, so that you know how old this thing is, and then freeze those in couple cup increments is a good idea, like 2-cup increments. And if you are using, I know I'm kind of darting all over with this, if you are using a canned stock, what you need to do is measure out 6 cups of it, and roughly that is 1 32-ounce container and another half of a 32-ounce container, or a 16-ounce can, to go along with that to give you the correct measurement for the soup. All right. And we're almost done with the chicken here, at which point I will have a new knife and a new board, because you can get seriously ill from mixing raw poultry with anything that's not raw. Basically, for cutting your vegetables, yeah, it's all going into the same soup, but it's just easier to get into the practice and keep up to it. All right. So this is going to join the rest. And this is going to make, coincidentally, about 4 cups of chicken when you do this. The 3 thighs, the 2 chicken breasts is going to make you about 4 cups. All right, and I am ready to get rid of my knife and board. And I am going to go to a be right back, and while we get this cleaned up and get ready for the second half. So I'll be back in a moment. Hello, thank you for the break. I am back with a nicely scrubbed hands and a new cleaned knife and cutting board. Now, in order to cook this, I am going to take some butter and a little bit of oil. There's my butter. And this is going to add a nice flavor to the chicken, and it will seal it so that all of the juices will not dribble out. So there's some butter. And you can use margarine if you like. I suggest, if you're going to be frying with butter, that you add some oil to it. Doing so raises the burn temperature of the butter and makes it so you don't end up with scorched butter, which will completely ruin the flavor of what you're doing. Okay, so we've got the butter and the oil in there. I have got parsley and sage and rosemary and a little bit of salt and pepper. You have one chance basically to correctly season your meat, otherwise it's just going to be underflavored, and that's never good. So I am going to add some parsley, and I am using my beloved rosemary grinder, because once again, if you just put the rosemary in there whole, it's like eating sticks. And what you want to do, especially with dried rosemary, is activate the oils. So putting it through a grinder or a mortar and pestle is what will do that for you. And I have got sage, which I absolutely adore. It just goes so well with so many meats. I put a little bit of that in there. And that was about a half teaspoon of sage, a teaspoon of parsley, and about a quarter teaspoon of rosemary. It's a strong herb. So now I'm going to turn on my hob, which you can't see up here, but it is a two top hot plate basically that we use for, well, anytime we need extra cooking space. I will, however, move it up here so you can see into it. And hello, Connor. Nice to see you. And once we get this going, it takes a minute or two for this to come up to heat. It's got a nice, it's not coils, it's actually plates that it's heating up. So it takes it a little while to get there, but it gives you a nice even heat across the whole, and it takes quite a while for it to cool down. So now I'm going to saute the meat and then just start adding vegetables into this. It's going to be cooking for about 20 minutes to get the potatoes cooked. I'm going to leave the juices from the chicken in there because it'll just add to the flavor of the soup. Once again, if you're just joining me, we are making soup and sandwiches today. The soup from scratch. And although I'm not making my own bread, everything else is pretty much being made for it. It's going to be an avocado and garbanzo bean or chickpea sandwich, and that's mashed together, and then lots of yummy things are going to be added to it. And there's the chicken into the pot. And now that can get out of the way. And there's quite a bit of vegetables in this creamy chicken vegetable soup. I have got onions and celery going in. I have got zucchini and green beans and carrots. And I don't really think we need to continue to watch what's going on in this. It's just gonna cook in the background for now. So I will push that back out of the way while I start processing vegetables. And for now, I'm just going to put the processed vegetables into the pan that I am going to use for cooking the roux, which is the thickener. Basically, it is a equal parts butter and flour, which you melt the butter, put the flour into it, stir it through, and you cook it for about 5 minutes, which will make it so that what you've got is cooked roux without it actually being browned. If you continue to get it darker, it'll actually add more of a brown color. If you were making a jambalaya, you would want it very browned, versus this, which we just want it to go to golden. Now, I have my husband has peeled the potatoes for me because I don't have a sink here. So I do thank him for all the work he does to make my streams possible, which, let's face it, is everything from doing the shopping to doing all the prep and tear down for me too. So this stream would not be possible without my husband Andrew, and I do thank him for it. So all I'm doing here is just dicing the potatoes, and I've got 3 potatoes that are going to go in this. I could very easily fill half the pot with potatoes just out of enthusiasm because, well, I love potatoes, and they just make, see, it's just a smallish dice. It's gonna make it so that they cook faster and are already the size that you'll want to have on your spoon. And again, as I said, this is a soup, not a stew, so the pieces are smaller. They're made to be easily eaten with a spoon, and soup is more something that you eat with something, with bread or with a sandwich, as a starter course for a meal, rather than stew, which is the meal, and so has larger, chunkier bits, and that is just, well, basically the difference between the two. I'm cutting the eyes out of this potato here. You could leave them in if you want. They're just kind of unsightly. And they are also a little unpleasant to eat. It's not difficult. You can do it with the end of an old-fashioned potato peeler, or you can just do it with a knife, and it's easy enough to do. So I am trying to get most of the vegetables all about the same size. It just makes for a prettier presentation, and it also it makes it so they have a tendency to cook at the same rate. So that's another consideration for it. And I used to be a lot faster with my knife work, but over the years I've had some nerve damage and whiplash and such, which makes my hands a bit less steady than they used to be, so slower is better than lopping off some fingers. Yeah, there's definitely lots of work going on here behind the scene and in front of the scene. The good thing about making your soup from scratch like this, if you make the full recipe, is that you're gonna have enough soup to not only have for a meal, unless you have a really large family in the rankings of over 10, you're going to be able to put some away and have it for, you know, another day. And quite honestly, soups taste better the second day after all of the spices have a chance to marry in with the stock, and it just combines. So fresh soup is good soup. Soup is always better the second day. All right, so this is, I've got 2 potatoes left to cut up. So these are not terribly large potatoes, which is fine. I'm not looking for a large potato. Sometime in the future, I will probably be making a baked potato soup for y'all, and that will be an adventure, because you get to dress it up at the end with what you would normally put on a baked potato. Things like cheese and bacon and chives, sour cream if you like. It's a nice hearty soup, and as we get deeper into winter, I'll be exploring more things like chowders and mealed soups. Because there's nothing better on a cold day, as you're looking out at snow or ice, to have, you know, a nice comforting bowl of like steaming soup. All right, I've got that potato cut up. I'm going to check on the chicken, see how it is doing. It's finally got up to heat here, so it's just starting to do the cooking now. And you can see I've got the oil and butter melted in the bottom, and the chicken is only just starting to color a bit. So I'll put that back onto heat. Now my cousin and I, after she got married and I started teaching her to cook, we had a lot of fun. We started with making stocks, and then we made broths and the soup itself. And it was an all-day process for us. We both worked, and we would do this on a Saturday like today, and the entire day was spent. We'd go out and do the shopping, and then we would do all of the prep work for making the broth. And once we did that, we'd have the pots on bubbling on the stove for simply hours while we visited and caught up. Started with coffee, moved into wine as the afternoon progressed. And some of the best times of my life, honestly, were those Saturdays spent with my cousin. You'll hear me mention her a lot. Her name is Tara, and she's in Idaho now, so she's in a completely different state from me. And this causes withdrawal symptoms, especially when I start thinking about all of the afternoons spent cooking. Just so much fun. And, you know, many hands make for less work, so that's also a thing. All right, so I am going to show you julienning carrots. And what that basically is making little matchsticks of them. It gives a different appearance to it. It's just sort of more fun in this case, rather than just having little carrot discs. And I'm using baby carrots because they're sweeter and nicer. Oop, too small. Now it's true that these days You can actually get carrots that are already matchsticks in the grocery store. If you want to go that way, that's perfectly fine because, well, anything that makes it so that you have less effort is always good, especially, you know, busy mothers and fathers, busy people working. It's something that's interesting to know how to do, but it's also extra work if you can already get it done. Alright, so on a big carrot. Basically what you want to do, keep your fingers out of the way, and I'm doing this at a larger stick rather than a smaller one. So I've divided this into 3 pieces, and then I'm going to cut it again. And what I've got is little sticks of carrot, as you can see. Now, the thing that we noticed, my cousin and I, when I first started teaching her to cook, her husband would choose the days that we cooked, and it was actually twice a week. It was Wednesdays and Saturdays. Her husband used to use those days to stay out and, play soccer, football for the UK. And he would, be out with his friends, go visit his family. But as we went along, he started saying, well, when's the food going to be ready? And he started showing up right at the time dinner was ready, basically, instead of eating it later. And which I guess is a testament to how much he liked the cooking. But it was also funny because we chose those times to be when we got together, and now suddenly we have a husband darting around in the back area asking when's dinner going to be ready and looking for snacks. So it was just entertaining. But he did become a fan, and he loved when I was teaching her to cook, because they have a really big chest freezer, which I envy with all my heart. And we filled that. We filled it completely with soups and stocks and what we call bricks of love. We got little individual size containers for making individual lasagnas and stuffed shells. Everything that we could, we put up in the freezer and made it so that while Tara was learning how to cook, she was also filling her freezer with foods that they no longer had to cook during the week, which is another really good thing about doing your cooking from scratch, is that you tend to always have leftovers. And what better use for them than to put them in your freezer to be used at a later date. Like when you come home and it's late and you're tired and you just don't really want to deal with having to cook. So you go to the freezer and you pull out, say, a turkey dinner that we've put up, which is, stuffing and some vegetables, turkey over the top of that, and then we ladle gravy over it and throw it in the freezer. And in the future, 12 minutes on high, and you have Thanksgiving dinner again. So that is one of the styles that I've always aimed for. I don't cook for just one meal. When I cook for, 3 or 4. Or in some cases, after Thanksgiving is when the turkeys go on sale. I highly recommend you do this. Go get them when they're 25 cents a pound. And, throw one of them into the pot just to make stock out of, and then you have an entire turkey of turkey salad. And I've got a couple turkey salad recipes we'll get into in the future. And you've got another turkey that you can throw into roast and make a whole bunch of stuffing. My cousin and I once bought 4 turkeys and used one of them just for making the stock that we needed in order to make the stuffing. And we ended up putting 70 turkey dinners up in the freezer. We divided them and had them for absolutely months, and it was wonderful. Anytime you wanted to have that, you could just go get one, and you'd have this lovely, filling turkey dinner. And to heck with the ones from the grocery store. You've already got one that's homemade. That's the best you can possibly get. And putting up meals the way you do, you got 6 or 7 different kinds of soup in there, and you have casseroles that you've frozen, and it just cuts down on the cooking later on, and that's really a help when you're talking about today, where you have all members of the family working, basically, not just the husband, and everybody having to deal with more traffic than ever. And of course, now you have a lot of people telecommuting from home, especially with COVID, but it still goes to the same thought. While you're home, you're still working, and it's just easier when you don't have someone that is, a dedicated homemaker, that their job is to do the cooking and get it on the table for you. And so cooking for preservation is a good idea. It's also fun. You can make a family thing of it, where you do the cooking together, cooking with your children to show them how to cook, because a lot of people just really missed out on that, and they may know how to cook 2 or 3 things, but they don't have a good education on what the cooking needs to be. I'm going to put a little bit more carrots into that. As you can see, I'm being very careful with this. It is true that the secret of not getting cut, at least in part, is having a sharp knife, but it is also being careful, keeping your fingers out of the way, and especially when you're dealing with a hard vegetable like a carrot, you want to keep your fingers out of the way so that you don't end up cutting them. It's just so easy, and it only takes a second or 2 more to make sure you don't get hurt. All right, I've got about a cup of carrots in there now. I love carrots raw. I don't particularly care for them when they are cooked. It's a strange thing. It's texture mostly, really. Does anybody have any questions so far? Once again, you can find my recipes on my Discord. Follow the link that we've got posted, and you can find them in Stream Recipes. To see the pictures of what I've cooked, it's under Food Pictures. I've also got an Instagram, and as a new thing, my recipes are now there for you to look at on YouTube. And you can do a search for me for Cooking with Hedgepigs, and you will find me there. And you can just hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything, and it will notify you when I've posted new recipes. So YouTube is a thing now, so my videos will not disappear after the 2 weeks. Twitch keeps them up. I also have a Twitter account, and I haven't done anything with it yet. I'm not really up on how to do the Twitter thing, so I am, as of yet, not posting my pictures there, but they will be. and tell your friends, tell your relatives, get them to go and see. Where's your food? Andrew asks. Well, it's not done yet, honey. I can make you a vegetarian sandwich if you like, real quick. Yes? No? I don't think so. My husband is a devout carnivore, so I don't really see that happening with him. I have got celery now I'm adding in here. Recipe calls for 3 or 4 stalks of celery. You can spend your time de-threading this if you want, but I find generally I don't notice the difference if you just dice it well enough. Having a long, thin, stringy piece of plant material isn't the best, and if you were using the celery in a whole application, using it for putting in a dip or for, eating with peanut butter or cheese or some sort of stuffing in the middle of it, then you definitely want to go to the trouble of de-stringing the celery. But if it's going to be diced, you're not going to notice the pieces anyway. So far I've got a cup of carrots and 3 potatoes in here. This is 3 stalks of celery. I'm going to add a little bit more. And earlier this week I diced a bunch of onion up, and so I'm going to use the leftover onion from that instead of starting a whole new onion and only using half of it. Now if you do want to de-string, you see these little lines that run down it? That's the string underneath it. You want to take and you just lightly hook the area with the edge of your knife, and then you can just pull the whole thing off, and that pulls the string out. And like I said, we will be getting another camera. Donations to my channel, never really asked for, but if you choose to give a donation and you can afford it, it'll be used to improve my channel, get more equipment, get things like a new microphone, which I know that we need. Right now I'm using a gaming headset, and you'll get that extra camera and make it so that it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. But as I said, always think of yourself first. Don't give us any money if it's going to put you in a bad spot. Hey Frumpy! Welcome in. Good to see you this Saturday. Again, I am making creamy chicken vegetable soup and sandwiches. And this is a vegetarian sandwich made with mashed garbanzo beans or chickpeas and avocados. Let me see. Hello MPH, how are you doing? I think you just heard what I'm doing, so I'm looking now on my side table. As I mentioned, I have some already diced onion, and this is a sweet onion. And this is about a cup. And that's going to go into my vegetable pot too. And it is once more time to check the chicken and see how it is doing. So I will bring this back down here. And you can see that it has turned white. Not all of it is yet. And it's released lovely cooking juices. Ooh, there went my glasses being fogged up. And I'm just stirring this around and making it so that the spices are more distributed, and that the pieces of chicken that have not had a contact with the bottom of the saucepan now will have it. It's almost ready for there. So I have got, once more for those just joining, I have got the recipe for this up in my Discord. And hello, Tina Bug. How are you doing today? I have got now the mushrooms in here. I found some, well, my husband found some decent mushrooms finally. We had a couple weeks there where the mushrooms that were available to us in the store just were really not that nice. And all right. And now I have a zucchini. This is a very vegetable soup, and this is a recipe that can be easily made with leftover turkey carcasses or chicken carcasses. So it also fits in with the leftover theme. A lot of soups, a lot of people look for soups after Thanksgiving as part of their recipes. You'll see, turkey a la king. Lots of people have lots of leftovers. And so turkey a la king, you've got, hot turkey sandwiches, turkey soup they'll make from the bones and some of the meat. And I decided, instead of having just a regular run-of-the-mill turkey soup one time, I decided to make it a creamy turkey soup, add lots of vegetables to it, and it was wonderful. Now, because I don't have a turkey right now, I made this with chicken, and I made my stock ahead of time, although I did tell you how to do it, both in the recipe and before I started getting cooking. Now, on selecting vegetables like zucchinis, they should not be wobbly. You want to have the vegetable be firm without being rock hard, but it definitely shouldn't bend. That's just, that's a bad thing. Bendy vegetables are very bad. You should not ever have flexible celery. Your zucchinis, your cucumbers, your carrots should not bend. That means they're old, and quite frankly, on the outs, really should be made into a soup, for instance, if you don't want to waste them. But you definitely don't want to select them from the grocery store like that. If they've been in your bin for a while and they start to get a little bendy, time to make a soup. So, all right. And I do believe that is everything but the broth, salt, and pepper. Okay. So, now I am going to take my cooked chicken, and I am going to add the vegetables to it. And because I like mushrooms, we are going to use 16 ounces of mushrooms, or 2 cups. And these are just white button mushrooms. They're not creminis. I find generally, if you are going to use mushrooms in with the meat, you want to choose your meat and veg appropriately. And as you can see, I've pretty much filled the crock pot or stock pot here, which I don't know how I managed to do, but yet I do it every time. And now I am going to add my chicken stock to it, and I think I'm going to increase this to 8 ounces, or pardon me, 8 cups, because, well, I did what I usually do, and I just overfilled everything. So this is going to get the broth added to it, and then I'm going to bring it to a boil, and it needs to cook for 20 minutes. to cook the vegetables through. I will also be re-seasoning because you really want to make sure that you season on every level. You season the meat, you season the stock when you make it, and you want to season the end product of the soup too. So, all right, come on. Careful not to spill my broth everywhere. Okay, now to this, which you can see is now pretty much covering it. Yeah, I love mushrooms too, MPH. I am going to add, in sage, because sage makes everything lovely. Then I am going to add in more parsley. Parsley, by the way, in addition to giving things a lovely flavor, is also high in iron. So if you're trying to find ways to get iron to your diet, especially important if you're a vegetarian, add parsley to it. It's pretty, tastes good, high in iron. It's a win-win. Well, win-win-win. And I'm going to add in some more rosemary, using my lovely rosemary grinder. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. And that's just measured in the palm of my hand. It used to be a game between my cousin and I that we would measure the spices into our hands and see which one was closest to the measuring. And it doesn't take long before you're actually pretty good at it. Okay, so now then we want to stir this all through. And the only things I haven't added to this yet are the green beans, because they are already mostly pre-cooked, so they don't need to have the extra cooking time. And I am now going to take and put this up to come to a boil and continue cooking. So, yeah, I'm okay, Connor. I'm actually starting to feel better now, so that's good. I'm going to run through the recipe real quick. Just to recap, this is a creamy chicken vegetable soup. And for the stock, I used a 6 to 8 pound chicken, 3 carrots, a half teaspoon of parsley, a half teaspoon of sage, a half teaspoon of rosemary, 1 large sweet onion chopped. And this just has to be just a real rough chop because everything in this is being discarded. 3 stalks of celery chopped, 8 cups of water, fresh ground pepper, probably about a half teaspoon, and a teaspoon of salt that you then take and bring it to a boil, reduce heat to medium and simmer until the chicken is tender, which is about 2 hours, and then you remove the chicken from the liquid and reserve it for another use. My favorite use is chicken salad of one kind or another, because I find that boiled meat has a tendency to be dry, which is odd when you consider it's been in liquid the whole time. But it's really kind of off-putting to be munching on your soup, and strangely enough, the chicken in it's dry. So instead I saute it and add it at a later point. You will want to strain the liquid into another pan and discard the vegetables. And then let that cool, and you can remove some of the fat. I recommend not removing all of it. It will harden into a layer on the top. Fat has flavor, so that's good. And now for the soup, uh, 4 cups of chicken, diced, which is basically 2 skinless, boneless chicken breasts and 3 um, chicken thighs that are also boneless and skinless. I have got julienne carrots, um, celery stalks, I have onion, I have 3 potatoes, I have a zucchini that's been cut up in there, and later we'll have 2 cups of green beans. And this soup has been made with originally 6 cups of the chicken stock, but I added 8 because I got a little overabundant with the vegetables as usual, trying to fill the entire stock pot. And it was seasoned with parsley, sage, and rosemary, and a little bit of salt. And later on, when this is done cooking, I will be thickening it with a roux and milk to make it creamy. That is the first half of what we're doing. The second half is what I'm going to start now, and that is taking garbanzo beans and avocados and mashing them together to make a sandwich. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of things you can do for a vegetarian sandwich. I like to put meat on it, or pardon me, a protein source in it, because it's always good to have a mix of your proteins and vegetables. And there's a lot of good vegetable sources of protein. Beans are an obvious choice, and so I chose garbanzo beans, which is, well, these right here. And they're also called regionally chickpeas. And if you were to grind this up, you would have hummus. But we don't particularly want hummus, so. Oh, that was bad. Was it bad? That was, no, okay. All right, sorry, starting to lose track of what I'm doing here. So for this, I'm gonna take the garbanzo beans, and I am going to take avocado. And this is 2 cans of garbanzo beans and roughly 2 cups of avocado. And they sell it now frozen. Did you know that? I didn't. Found it and thought that would just be easier to process rather than show everybody how to de-stone and peel these little fellas. If you want to see that, you can go to Connor's stream, where he almost every day is doing something with avocados, uses it a lot in his cafe. You can find him at The Only Deaf Guy on Twitch. Now, just making sure you can see what I'm doing by checking my view. Ooh, Claire Coffee has rated us. Thank you, Claire. Welcome in, everybody. It's amazing having you guys come in. My name is Hedgie, and I am a new cooking streamer. I cook heirloom recipes from my family and my own recipes too. And today I am making a vegetarian sandwich with mashed chickpeas, and honey, I need a potato masher for this. This isn't going to work like I thought it was. Sorry. I'm making a mashed chickpea and avocado sandwich with, I'm going to add all kinds of goodies to it, sliced tomatoes, Swiss cheese, just basically dress it up into a nice sandwich to have with the creamy chicken vegetable soup I'm making. How was your stream today? How was your stream today, Claire? Everything go good for you? What did you cook? Hold on just a moment. I need to make sure my husband heard me. I don't think he did. Honey, I need to find some kind of potato masher. That would work. Okay. Welcome in everybody from the raid. I really appreciate the new follows. I'm just so happy to see you all here and have you join me for my little soup and sandwich thing I'm doing. I'm basically doing leftovers and things that go along with leftovers. So this is a suggestion of what to do after you roast a chicken or have a turkey for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and this is what to do with the carcass. So I made broth from that, and we're now making a chicken vegetable creamy soup. And this is going to be mashed avocados and chickpeas for a vegetarian sandwich. And you just saw me add a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper to this. And I'm going to add about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I am also, because you're dealing with avocados here, and it just tastes nice, it will also help the avocado not oxidize so quickly. I am going to add a teaspoon of lemon. So I've got some lemon juice here, and I added about a teaspoon to it. Mayonnaise, that's about a tablespoon of mayonnaise. And I have got the soup up here on the top of my Farberware, and it is starting to simmer, and it needs to cook for 20 minutes to get everything, all the vegetables tender. Trying to give this a little bit of a mash while my husband finds our potato masher. And you just want sort of a rustic chunk on this. We don't want to have it blended smooth. We're not going for hummus here. The texture is part of the appeal in this dish. Okay, thank you. And here is the potato masher. It's just pretty easy. There's a variety of styles of these. This just goes through and gives a little mash, mixes it up for us. I do a lot of things with chickpeas or garbanzo beans. I will continue to use both because one is basically another name for the same thing. It's regional mostly. You'll see people calling them chickpeas in the South, but garbanzo beans mostly everywhere else. So it's always a good cue on where exactly the person comes from to see what they call these. I use them a lot in salads, obviously, because they just go wonderfully in salad. You can make a 3-bean salad out of this with wax beans and green beans and chickpeas, and it's sort of a pickled application, and it's makes a good side or adding it onto a regular salad. They go well in soups. When I make my vegetarian taco salads, I use I use these chickpeas and garbanzo beans in it as the protein source, and they're just tasty. They have a real mild flavor. They're kind of starchy. Um, but they add nice texture to things. They add a nice dose of protein that doesn't have fat in it. So if you're trying to watch your cholesterol, it's a good protein source for that. And I am going to give this a taste and see if I've got it seasoned correctly. I do. All right. So that portion is done. And now I'm going to give our soup another little stir. Oh, there you go. Just glad to hear that super slow internet was a failing cable to your apartment. Bet that was fun to go through all of that. Try to find out. Did you have to call them and have them test the line, or? Oh dear, we're dropping frames. I'm terribly sorry. So we've got our soup cooking away. It is probably going to take another 20 minutes at least. It's being a little recalcitrant here and just not wanting to come to a full boil. But let's talk about bread for sandwiches. Now, there's nothing wrong with just, grabbing a loaf of plain white bread. But especially if you're going to have company or you're going to have a more hearty sandwich, you probably want to go with a bread that is a little less processed than your standard white bread. I like the artisan breads that are coming out everywhere now. They have a heartier texture, basically. You can also get a lot more flavors to add to your sandwich with them. You can get things like, 7 grain and 9 grain and 29 grain in some of these cases. You can choose something like a rye bread, like caraway rye or a marbled rye. All of these have a denser texture to them than white bread and will stand up better for either more weighty filling or just not crushing down. So if you're going to have to do something like grill the sandwich, you might want to look into a different kind of bread rather than your go-to white bread. It's also really nice to serve something like that to your guests if you're having people over for something. You can turn a sandwich into something more presentable, less everyday, by choosing different breads. And I will also have a episode regarding basically making sandwiches, where we've got different kinds of sandwiches, different kinds of bread, and You can make up trays of these things to have guests over. If your kids are going to have their friends over, especially as they get into teenage years, maybe they want pizza roll-ups or whatever, but you can also give them, you know, trays of, that's not good. Trays of assorted sandwiches, you know, chicken and turkey and roast beef, and you know, make them a little exciting with different breads, cutting them up, making them into finger sandwiches, um, adding different toppings that are just mayonnaise and mustard. So I hope I don't have to switch to the regular stove. Crud. Hold on one moment, please. We will be right back. We're having some technical difficulties with the hob. There we go. Thank you. Sorry for that. We apparently, today is the day for technical difficulties. My Farberware cooktop that we've had here decided that the burner wasn't going to work. So it's back on. We are making sure that we can switch this to the regular stove if we have to. I would prefer not, because that splits the cooking space by about 12 feet. Yeah, white bread does soak up a lot of liquid. In addition to that, it's just they've gone so much into making the bread soft that it just has no resistance at all. I find that when I bite into a white bread sandwich that basically it gums up behind my front teeth, and that's just kind of gross. So I am adding some celery to this for a little more texture. Okay. And the sandwich is going to be, like I said, garbanzo bean and avocado, which I use 2 cans of garbanzo beans, drained and rinsed, the equivalent of 2 avocados, 2 stalks of celery diced, salt and pepper, tablespoon of lemon juice, and I'm going to be using one of my favorite bread makers here is the Seattle, what was that? Seattle Sourdough Baking Company, and you can find wonderful things like the one I'm using this time, which is a cracked wheat sourdough. It softens the sourdough a little bit and has a lovely texture to the bread, and it's just got a little bit of the wheat in it. It's about a half and half wheat bread, and so that makes it more appealing for people that maybe have a hard time with a lot of wheat breads. The sourdough tang to it definitely adds flavor to it, and conversely, the sourdough also softens the is softened by the wheat bread and adds flavor to it at the same time. So it's kind of nice. And I don't know if it's available all over the country, but this is Seattle, so I reap the benefits. Yeah, my husband says bread is bread, and yet he will not eat wheat. So I kind of call a little bit of BS on that. So we've got that mixed in, and my soup is just not boiling. It'll get there. All right. Another favorite of my breads is ciabatta bread, and they have it in rolls. You can find it in loaves. It's relatively easy to make, actually. It's another of the new artisan breads you can see everywhere, and it has a really nice flavor. It tends to have large holes in it, um, which is fine if what you're using is one of their buns. And it's just it 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 stands up well to making sandwiches with it. You wouldn't want to have something like a grilled sandwich on it because there it goes again. The rind, the sorry, I'm getting a little flustered as my equipment is acting oddly. Um, the basic skin of the bread is a little too crispy if you try to grill that. Um, this will keep in the refrigerator roughly a week at the most. You probably want to eat it sooner than that because of the avocados. They'll just discolor. It doesn't really do anything. It's just oxidization. But it doesn't make such a pretty application anymore. To I am going to serve the sandwich with, it's going to have some mayonnaise and mustard on it. It is going to have some Swiss cheese. Love Swiss cheese. Uh, well, that did absolutely nothing. There we go. And I've got pre-sliced. Baby Swiss cheese is a lovely choice because baby Swiss cheese is milder than your regular Swiss. Swiss is a dry cheese, and that makes it so that it's a little. It works well if you're going to be doing melting. Yeah, because it's just not coming to a boil. Can you reach over me for it? Put it on high, please. And I will turn this off. And what did I drop down here? I've got the mayonnaise. I am going to take and spread some. I dropped the mustard too, honey. I'm going to spread one side with a little bit of light mayonnaise. And by that I don't mean actual light mayonnaise, but not a heavy covering because there's already quite a bit of oils in avocados that make them nice and creamy. Okay, so I've got some mayonnaise, and I am going to, now the recipe calls for Dijon, but I'm out of Dijon, excuse me. But so I am using yellow mustard here, kind of sparingly. It has a completely different flavor than Dijon. Dijon is a nice mild mustard with you can definitely taste the wine that they use in it. So yeah, it's a bit more refined, I guess, than uh, plain old yellow mustard. They both have their places. And let me see. So I've got that down there, and then I will take switch my bread around the other way. I'm going to take the garbanzo bean, avocado, celery, mayonnaise topping that I put in here with a nice layer of that down. And like I said, I've been mostly vegetarian. I am what they call an ovo-lacto pescatarian vegetarian, which means I eat fish, I eat dairy products, eggs, but for the most part, vegetable protein. Fish as well, of course, with the pescatarian part. Um, this is dietary driven rather than uh, any other reason. I lost the ability to digest meats, so I had to go vegetarian. Um, Let me see. So I've got that there now. I need to take a nice tomato, and this is a beefsteak tomato, although it's a rather small one. It is um, a tomato that was bred basically so that, this is the tomato, sorry, I didn't see, I wasn't showing it. Uh, they're basically made so that they have more of the flesh and less of the seeds. So it makes for a better slicing tomato. And I like tomato, it adds lots of broth to it. So as you can see here, there's a lot less of these areas in here with the seeds and pulp, and much more of the meat of the tomato. And I slice it relatively thickly because I like tomato. And as you see, even in the middle, it's still gone to the point where you've got very little of the seeds and pulp and mostly the flesh of the tomato in there. These also make for good uh, sauce tomatoes if you're going to be making the sauce from that. Now I'm going to layer the tomatoes on here. And it looks like maybe half a tomato for the end. And at this point, I'm going to say again, seasoning. You need to season things. So if you're going to put tomatoes on your sandwich, you'll want to add a little sprinkle at least of pepper, because never miss the opportunity to season things. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. I've already salted the garbanzo beans and avocados, but this is a new ingredient, so just a pinch of salt across the top of that. And now I'm going to take these back off because I'm not perfect, and unfortunately I forgot to put the cheese on. So I've got Swiss cheese here. As I said earlier, it goes well with this particular flavor combination. And it's just a nice cheese overall. Now I'm going to put my tomatoes back on it. And then I am going to put some shredded lettuce on the sandwich as well. This would also go really well with arugula as an alternate green, or spring greens if you have those around. The salad mix that they come up with them for spring greens is lovely with this. The arugula, if you've never tasted it before, is a very herbaceous green. It has a slight peppery flavor and is also slightly bitter. So it makes for an interesting addition to sandwiches or salads. Now I am going to close the sandwich, and it's a pretty thick sandwich at that. And then take and cut it. And I need a plate for plating. Okay. Just a moment while I go and get that plate. Hello, Dream Eaters. Welcome in. Sorry, I do not move swiftly. And for those of you just coming in, we have been making creamy chicken soup today, creamy chicken vegetable soup, and a vegetarian sandwich of mashed garbanzo beans and avocado. And we have, look at that. We have got a sandwich here of the mashed garbanzo beans and avocado, some Swiss cheese, tomato, and lettuce. And here's the sandwich again. I'm going to take a taste of it, even though the soup isn't done yet. Sorry, trying to swallow the mouthful. That's lovely. The cucumber and avocado mash, pardon me, chickpea and avocado mash is creamy without having no texture to it. The partially mashed garbanzos have added a little interest to the bite. You can taste the brightness of the lemon juice in it. You could use lime, but the lemon juice is a nice bright lifting to the heavier garbanzo beans and avocado. The tomato, the cheese, it just adds a roundness to it. The cheese adds its own little bit of texture to it. It adds the tomato is a lovely ripe tomato, so you have the slight sweetness of the tomato, and then the crunch of the lettuce. And then you have the bread supporting it all. It's a nice hearty tooth-resistant bread, shall we say. It's not a really soft bread. It's more heavy in nature, and you can taste the tang of the sourdough. It's just a really lovely sandwich. Has the soup come to a boil, honey? It's done when the potatoes are soft. Oh, I haven't been talking? Jeez. Sorry about that. Like I said, I'm using a gaming headset, and when I coughed, I flipped it up, and when I flipped it back down, it didn't make the beep noise that tells me I'm actually able to be heard. So, I'm talking about making a roux. We're taking half a cup of uh, butter and melting that and adding half a cup of flour into it to make your roux. And you always want to make the same measurements. If you've got half a cup of flour, you add half a cup of butter. If you have a cup of butter, you add a cup of flour. Whatever it is, it's always in proportion. And you want to then take and melt your butter with your flour. There's always the point where you wonder if you don't have enough butter. Well, apparently I lost my music too. I don't know what I would do without my technician, aka the husband. And I just added a little bit of oil to that too, just so I'm doubly sure it doesn't burn, since the hob is acting oddly today. You basically mix this up, and for a white sauce or a bechamel, what you are looking for is a lightly cooked roux. You'll want it to cook enough to be actually cooked through, and you won't have a raw flour taste, but you don't want it to actually brown. If you were going to make a different application for this, if you were going to make something like a crawfish étouffée, if you were going to make a gumbo, you would want this butter in here to, or the flour in here to burn, well, not burn, to brown very deeply. You would want it to be almost chocolate colored. In this case, we want it to just be slightly golden. And that will take about 5 minutes of cooking. No more than that. After that, you start adding color to it by browning the flour more. And like I said, that's what we do not want to do. Okay. So while we do this, the next thing I will talk about is milk. It's very easy to have this lump up. And I was taught when you're making either country gravy or a white sauce, you want to heat the milk. You don't want it to be hot, you just want it to be warm, because cold milk into simmering roux is just a recipe for everything to seize up when it meets each other from the shock of the cold and the hot. If you start with warm milk, you can almost do away with that. Oh, is that frumpy that you weren't hearing me and I was doing things? And I am watching the time very closely on this. You can also see a change in the color when it gets there. You can see that in the areas where it's shallower, the flour has gone a lighter color. The mixture has gone a lighter color, which is what you want it to do. And this is something that you don't want to burn. If you do burn it for some reason, you can start again very easily. Just dump it out, wipe out your container, and start again with more butter and flour. Yes, Frumpy, it was your side. You did this to us. It was you. I don't dare actually blame Andrew for that because, you know, he runs everything. So he is always faultless. It's either my fault or someone else's, never his. Yes, bad Frumpy. Bad Frumpy. Now, don't you feel ashamed? Now this same roux you could use for any number of things. You can add chicken stock to it or stocks to it, and it'll turn into a nice rich gravy. You can add milk to it, and it will turn into a white sauce, which after you get the good white sauce going, you can add cheese to it and it becomes a lovely velvety thick cheese sauce. In this case, I am going to be making a very thick white sauce because you have two ways to go with cream soups. You can either add a lot of milk to it in order to get the milk in it and to thicken it, or you can do a very thick white sauce, about the consistency of a milkshake, and you can get away with a lot less milk. Normally I would add once upon a time I would have added about 6 cups of milk to this, but in this case it's only 2 cups and thickened a lot, and then what you get from there is a creamy thick soup that tastes like it has a lot of milk in it, but it really doesn't. Alright, I'm going to turn the heat down on this and start adding my milk. And once again, you do it very quickly, lots of whisking, and just whisk for your life. And that was 2 cups of milk, and you just start whisking at this point until it all gets combined. And if you do end up with lumps, get your stick blender out and just blend that, and it'll be smooth and fine. So there's ways to save a slightly lumpy gravy or white sauce. Yes, you should be waiting for a lightning strike there. I'll have to check later and see how far away the lightning strike was from us. And there was some silent communication going on between Andrew and I of a kind that cannot be mentioned on a family-friendly stream. So at this point, everything's almost done. You have seen my lovely sandwich, and I have tasted it in front of you. And it's gonna be good I'm gonna get a lot of lovely sandwiches out of that. Unfortunately, no one else in my family will eat it because they all are very much meat eaters. The soup is boiling and it is almost done, Andrew tells me. When the potatoes are tender, the soup is done. And I'm not sure if it's coming across, but the white sauce is already starting to thicken. You can see sort of a consistency change as I stir. This is still far thinner than you would want for anything, but it is starting to thicken up. It doesn't really take very long to make a good white sauce. Doesn't have any lumps in it. Between the warm milk and the frantic whisking at the beginning, we have got a good blend on this. And this is only running at about medium at this point. You don't really ever want to boil your white sauces. You can break them, curdle them. And once again, there is a point. Once it's broken, you really can't bring it back together again. And by broken, I mean it will basically have turned into cheese. The whey will separate from the milk, and it will be a yucky, clumpy mess. This, however, is coming along nicely. And later, when I start doing things with cheese sauces, when I start making cheese sauces, we will be revisiting the white sauce, and it will be something that is visited over and over again because the Bechamel or white sauce is one of the mother sauces that is used as a foundation of a lot of things. Any kind of cream-based anything has a white sauce in it. You've got white sauces that are the bases of cheese, and it's something that you will want to get in your repertoire and get it mastered. It's not hard. Equal measure butter and flour, melt it, brown it for 5 minutes, and then whisk in warm milk, and you've got it. It's not as hard as it sounds, basically. It's like tempering the eggs that I did with the eggnog, the cooked eggnog I made. That is also something that sounds a lot more intimidating than it actually is. So at this point, if I was just making this as a white sauce, I would say it's done, but we're going far beyond that in thickness, because what we need this to do is to thicken the entire pot of soup. Except I need that hob. Oh, okay. All right. So my chicken soup is back and ready to have this white sauce, when it's thick enough, be added into it. And just so you have an idea, this right now is what they would call thick enough to coat a spoon. You can see it's done that. That's considered a done sauce, but we're actually going for thicker than that. So, and it will very quickly go to thicker than that. Once you reach that stage, it very quickly goes to thicker. Now, if you're trying to go for a white sauce and it gets too thick, really easy to deal with, just add in more milk. And as you can see, it's starting to look like very thin mashed potatoes. And that's what we are hoping for. A little bit thicker than this, and it'll be ready to add to the soup. And I think you can see that now it's more like a thick gravy. If you can see this, I'll try to get it closer under here. You can see it actually holds together a bit. So it's almost as thick as we want it to be. And I have actually at this point turned the heat off underneath this, because it really doesn't need any additional. All right. We are almost up to milkshake consistency, which is what you're going for when you're going to be using this to thicken a pot of soup or chowder, because the broth will thin it out quite a bit, because that's got 8 cups of broth in it, and this is only 2 cups of roux or white sauce at this point. So, as you can see, it's at this point almost the consistency of whipped cream. Just make sure you keep stirring everything. And I'm going to move that to the other burner. And bring the finished soup in here, which is your first sight of it since it was taken away. And we have got lovely veg and meat, and I am now going to add the green beans in, because they just need to be brought to temperature. Like I said, they were already pre-cooked and from my cousin's garden, which we thank her for. So I'm now going to add the green beans in. Stir those through. And now I add my white sauce. Trying not to hit the camera. It really is only about 5 inches above this. Oh dear. So in other words, my husband is assuring us that he didn't take any of the chicken out and test it to make sure it wasn't poisoned. So then we start stirring this up, and this is not going to be as thick as a chowder, so just to make that clear, I would have made more roux, but you can see that it's taking on a nice creaminess. And I wish you had smell-o-vision. You can smell the rosemary, you can smell the sage in this, you can smell the chicken and the vegetables. It's just a wonderful, oh, such a lovely smell. I really wish I could bottle this and sell it to you. You'd all be making pots of this. So, and there is a little bit of butter on the top of this from having sauteed the chicken in butter. And I am going to give this a few moments for the last vegetables in there to come to temperature. And then we will be serving it up, and my husband will be tasting it and letting you all know just how lovely this soup is. And although it is a cream soup, it does freeze well. If you let this sit in the refrigerator overnight, the flavors will deepen in it. The herb flavor will go more thoroughly through the sauce, and